I appreciate that the screen has just disappeared in the background, but today what we're talking about is all about goodbye tedious work and hello work execution system. So just very quickly, from right to left, Gaurav, can you introduce yourself and what you do?
So, Gaurav, I am the VP, Global Head of Intelligent Automation at Sigma.
Perfect. That's okay, don't worry, we can carry on.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. This is Nishchay this side. I am working as a partner and heading the Global Charter for Intelligent Automation at Zinnov, and pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Good morning or good afternoon. My name is Darren. I'm the CTO for automation at the Royal Free in London. For those who don't know the Royal Free, it's part of the NHS nationally.
Fantastic, thank you. And Somi, would you mind introducing yourself just once more?
Yeah, sure. I'm Somi Aryan. I'm a tech philosopher, and I'm building a Web3 education platform.
Thank you very much. So we've heard a lot about the work execution gap, and I don't think many companies and organisations have been very successful in identifying what it is, and I think even fewer have been successful in deploying intelligent automation components in order to bridge that gap. However, we are lucky to be joined by, I would say, the embodiment of one of those success stories, Darren, and the work that you've done across the NHS. And I've got two simple questions for you. What is the best example of the work execution gap within the NHS, and how have you bridged it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting being here today to see, I guess, almost a refreshing new view on what could be done around bridging that gap. And just to say, I've been doing automation now in healthcare for 7 years. This isn't something we just started 6 months ago, and it's been a very arduous journey, should we say. I think for us, we're using intelligent automation and other technologies to make time matter, so freeing up time for our hard-working staff to do more or spend more time with our patients. And I think that's been our primary focus. So if we're talking about the one that's made the biggest change, I think for me it has to be the way that we're processing referrals coming from GPs, from primary care into the acute. Before we automated it, it required human secretaries to process each referral. It took about 20 minutes to do and a whole raft of paper. And now that's being done seamlessly with robots 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I will never claim, because it'd be disrespectful to my NHS colleagues, that robots are saving lives, but they're definitely processing those referrals into the acute a lot faster and quicker than they used to, which has been a huge benefit.
And was there any challenges, I suppose, from an employee point of view in terms of embedding that technology? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Absolutely. I mean, it's been huge. Remember, when I started out, I don't think anyone's doing automation in healthcare. So anyone doing it now has a much easier journey based on the work that we've done and the barriers that we've broken down. And we made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I think if there's one thing that everybody should really focus on, forget about technology, it's about setting the right culture in the organisation, and that culture goes beyond senior management and execs. You've got to go down to the staff at the grassroots, really, and bring them on that journey. So again, your robots are supportive, saving time. There's been conversations today about allowing staff to do higher valued work, and I've heard the word promotion somewhere along the line. Let's get it right. It's allowing staff to do the job they're employed to do, the work that they've spent many years training to do, and the things that they're passionate about, which in my world is caring for patients. And I think once we started having that very open and honest dialogue around what we're doing and engaging them on that journey, I mean, it just flew from there. Once you get the first process done, it just happens. But there are many organisations that haven't got that right, and so they've stifled along the way. And we'll see those repercussions, I think, in sort of coming months and years.
Thank you very much. So, Nishay, turning to the analyst view, if you wouldn't mind, we've heard a little bit there about work execution gap within the NHS, how to solve it with your colleagues. How real is it for you? Can you provide some other examples sort of outside of public sector?
Sure, absolutely. I think Darren touched upon how the work execution gap is playing out at NHS, and I think if you zoom out, right, the work execution gap has been around since a long time. There are multiple facets, multiple dimensions to work execution gap, and more often than not, this concerns with two broad facets, which is to do with quality of work and quantity or volume of work. In terms of the quality of work, it's really about employees doing a lot of highly repetitive manual menial works, which is lower order, and often leads to a very poor employee experience. And on the other side, we have volume or quantity of work, which is to do with employees getting bogged down by too much work, which leads to burnouts, right? So, this is what triggers the whole diminishing of employee experience, and then we've all heard about terms like the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle, quiet quitting, and so on. Let me take an example to drive this home. So, if you go back in 2020, and at the onset of the COVID wave. we all heard about how the small businesses were really grappling with a lot of challenges. Back in the US alone, there were almost 100,000 businesses, small businesses that had to shut shops. In order to really overcome this, the US federal government, of course, came up with the whole Small Business Administration, or SBA loans. Now, while this was a step in the right direction, the challenge there was that it was a mammoth task because within the first 2 days of launching this new policy, there were almost 400,000 applications which came in, right? And with the existing workforce to really manage this kind of a loan volume was unimaginable. So the government really had two options. One, they could add more workforce, to almost process these loans, which is again more time-consuming, more effort-intensive. And the other option was to look to technology, right? And that's what the government did. So they started implementing a lot of automation technology, including, AI-powered intelligent document processing, which could, ingest the documents, you'd really convert it into a more structured format, and then do the basic jobs of ensuring the data completion is there, the data validation, flagging of fraudulent data, and so on, right? So that paired with RPA bots were able to take on a lot of the mammoth workload that was there in front of the workforce. And this scenario of human workers plus digital workers enhanced the overall experience both for the small business owners, which is the customer experience side of things, and also for the internal workforce, which is the EX or employee experience. So this is, I would say, one of the most pertinent examples that I can think of when you look at the work execution gap and how really the digital workers and human workers came together to alleviate this.
Yeah, in order to bridge it, and that's a really interesting insight. And the fact the government organisation were able to recognise that gap, articulate it, and then do something about it. And really, I'll turn to you, Gaurav, for that from a partner point of view. When your clients come to you with their requirements and their challenges, does it appear to be a work execution gap? Do they recognise it as that gap, or do they recognise it as something different?
So, yeah. So kind of most of the client organizations that speak with, my colleagues are here in the audience, they probably do it more than me as well on a daily basis. And if we start to kind of peeling under the layers of the macro challenges that they always come up with, it's like either falling revenues, or it's about rising cost, it's about customer satisfaction, it's about process accuracies and stuff. But you start kind of peeling the layers, the problem always is this work execution gap, because the one thing that we try to co-establish with them is all of these kind of revenue, CSAT, and cost pressures, these are the symptoms. These are the symptoms that the organizations see. The crux of the problem is the gap, is that organizations have struggled to kind of find the right mix of people, right mix of technology, empower people with the right technologies, empower technologies with the skills of the people. And all of these organizations that we deal with, and most of these organizations that we deal with, they've grown tremendously. They've got massive successes over the last few years. But what we sense is that when they grew, their mindset was quite unidirectional, like let's grow. Be it acquisitions, be it adding bespoke processes for every customer because you have to go quicker into the market. Let's add applications after applications. Let's create a complex labyrinth of processes and technologies and throw people at the problems. And that's how they've grown. And imagine these people, these smart workers, have to kind of run your operations, kind of meet the KPIs, meet your SLAs, wow your customers, on top of working with some of the things, the processes that are clunky, the systems that are not tied together properly. And these might have worked in the past for these large organizations, and they have been successful, but things that we discussed, look at the events now. One, the pandemic, completely changed the way we interact with our kind of workplace, right? Think about the new career options that people have got. Like 10 years back, if someone said that there's going to be massive roles around machine learning, intelligence, creative roles in social media, not that I would be any good at it, but there are so many interesting creative career options for people. Look at the rise of education as well. The one thing that we see, like education has become so much accessible to people now. Anyone with any remote interest in learning something new can get themselves educated. And can you imagine these people, after their wonderful education, knowing something big, trying to do something more creative, and then you make them do work which is not interesting, which is not creative, things that you and I can sit and map into a flow with boxes and arrows. Like, that's not fair to people. So I think this is the crux of the problem, is that we haven't empowered people with technology. We haven't found, I think most organizations haven't found the optimal balance of what's good with people, what's good with tech, and how can you combine them.
That makes absolutely perfect sense. And I've got an extension to the question, if you wouldn't mind. You mentioned there around education, right? And we're probably having to do quite a bit of evangelizing of the benefits of intelligent automation and how to make it work. At a very high level, what's Cyclam's approach to doing this? Are you having to educate your customers quite a bit, or are they already there? Just trying to understand a little bit more detail.
Yeah, perfect. So there's kind of two aspects to this. I think one is always, we say, is tackling the as-is. So this is understanding where the organization is in its kind of maturity of processes and maturity of their operating model. So this is where we work with organizations to educate them to understand where the problems lie. And most of the times they said it is around the gap, around the work execution gap. This is thinking of how we can help them embed all of these kind of smart and intelligent technologies as lies and kind of bring, and it's not piecemeal automation, bring this whole kind of suite, this ecosystem of technologies into the operations, working alongside people, and be it the execution through automation, be it reading and interpreting documents through IDP, be it diagnosing your processes and your operations through process mining, be it talking to customers through conversational AI. So bring this whole suite of smart technologies. How do we solve the problems? How do we kind of make employees feel more empowered? And again, it goes to the flip side as well, that it's not about just because you have a fantastic NLP doesn't mean you force automation. Just because it could be automated doesn't mean it should be automated as well, right? So finding that right mix is the as-is. And the other thing that we do is the to-be. Now, we always talk about automation coming in and people doing more value-added work, but what is that value-added work? So this is where we also start educating and working with organizations to find those incremental changes that people can bring now that they have time, now that they can add more creativity and empathy to wow their customers, all of these incremental value to make services better, but also think of some of the most step changes, right? So this is where we help them with our innovation workshops and gamification to understand what more can you do? Can you think of new processes? Can you think of new applications? Can you think of new revenue streams? Things that you never thought of, things that you thought of, but you never had the bandwidth to do it before, but now that you have the time, you have people's creativity. So I think that's how the as-is and the to-be. And just one in closing, one of the things that I always advocate, and there's a saying that the whole is always greater than the sum of its parts, and that's probably the mentality. It's not about the best technology that we have. It's not about the best in people. It's about how you can bring them together. You can bring them together in a synergetic way to create something much more exciting, much more bigger, much more unique.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Gaurav. So, if we turn to you, futurist opinion, what do you think is in store for the work execution gap in the future? Does it continue to get wider? Is it going to be bridged?
Yeah,
what do you think?
I think that it's from where I stand and looking at what we are experiencing in Web3, one of the biggest problems that I have right now is actually finding people who are skilled enough in that area, right? So as you probably have heard of the term decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, right? So these DAOs at the moment, they're not really DAOs, they're more like do's. There's no autonomous in there, right? They're really, it's so hard to get anything done because there's no a centralized authority, but also there is not enough AI to or to help them organize. So we are really desperately looking for people who have got the right kind of skills, and it's very hard. So if you think about the jobless claims in America, the jobless claims is not going. Basically there are a lot of jobs that are not being fulfilled because there are not enough skilled workers. So it's not that there are not enough work. There is enough work, but there's not enough skilled workers. And I think this is going to be a massive problem, for companies if they don't manage to, address that.
Absolutely. Skill up the workforce, get them involved, get them leveraging and using that technology, I think is the message that we're hearing. Well, look, with that, we're going to wrap up. Thank you ever so much, all four of you, for contributing to the discussion. Really appreciate it. Round of applause for our panelists.